Okay, peace family. We're back once again with another exclusive guest, and this is one I'm definitely proud to have on the platform. Tobin Costen, aka TC, born in Fort Hood, Texas, spent at least 13 years in Germany. It says as an army brat on his own website, so we'll get into that in a bit. This man is a creative genius in his own right, a marketing genius, has a bachelor's degree in communications and marketing. So, you know, known for his work with No Limit Records, known for his work with Little Troy and other people within the music business, King Troy and stuff. King George, I should say. Tobin, what's good, brother?
Hey, how are you doing, Fonzie? So good to be on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time. It's fabulous, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like I was saying in the introduction, I'm definitely honored to be having this conversation with you because I respect the work that you've done in the music business, the part that you played within No Limit Records, which has spawned like a huge following around the world, which has spawned a huge legacy. And a lot of that's attributed to P, and we understand his part to playing it and stuff, but we know it takes a lot of people that you was around at an instrumental time and stuff as well, so it's glad to see you even getting celebrated within the legacy and stuff too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, you know, a lot of people have reached out. It's been great that people have kind of recognized me and the things that I've done in the industry. And, you know, when you get folks that reach out and say, hey, you know, what you've done in this industry is special and different, it definitely feels good. And I am so thankful for everyone's love and support, and I'm humbled by it as well.
So we say you initially came from Texas then, and before you made your way to Germany. At what age did that transition happen, and how long was you in Texas for?
So I went back and forth to Texas from the time I was born. I moved back and forth between Texas and Europe and all over. But I was in Texas probably about 4 years. Some of that was like middle school or junior high, as some people say, up until the beginning of high school. And then I moved back to Germany. And then I wanted to finish in high school over in Germany before I went back to the United States to start college. Okay. So it was definitely back and forth. I would say my mother's from New York and my father's from Washington, D.C. So we're an East Coast kind of family, but my roots were in Texas because many of my friends in the time that I spent in Texas, I kind of developed a love and respect for it because obviously I was born there and I lived there for some time. And then also the fact that I spent a lot of time there doing my music business days, with Master P as well as with King George and Little Troy. So I got a chance to spend a lot of time in Texas and do some great things there. So I consider that probably more of my third home after California and Germany. I would probably say Texas would be a third or fourth home. Also, I consider Washington somewhat of a home of mine as well.
Okay.
State that.
So a man of the world, we definitely know that. And so speaking about being out in Europe and especially Germany, when you was out there at that time studying, working, was you listening to what music was you listening to? Were you listening back to a lot of the stuff in the States?
I was listening to a lot of stuff in the States. I was a huge fan of a group called UTFO. They did the Roxanne record. And, Doc Ice, Educated Rapper, Kango Kid. I was a huge fan of those guys. I was a fan of the Fat Boys, huge fan of them, fan of Run DMC and Houdini. A lot of those groups in the 80s I was in love with. I think, I did listen to some EDM music for my time being in Germany, so a little bit of that, but mainly I was into hip hop like crazy. 1989, a friend of mine who I live with in the area with Germany named Lamont Jack turned me on to gangster rap because he turned me on to NWA and he turned me on to Ice Cube. And that's when I started really kind of changing my mindset of all kinds of music, not only just the East Coast sound, but also some of that West Coast sound and some of that gritty sound and gangster rap itself. And that's what I was always excited about, the different genres within rap music and within hip hop, because sometimes people, they think there's hip hop is just one thing, but no, there's different type of genres within the genre itself. And I fell in love with that West Coast sound and the organ sound and the way the beats were put together. So, huge fan of all of hip hop. but definitely got once NWA came out, I became a real fan of that vision of talking about what's going on in the streets and the storytelling aspect of hip hop.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I could definitely attest to what you're saying about just the different elements that hip hop's been known to be able to include. Whereas some people think of hip hop as just a standalone genre itself, but it being able to take music from whether it's rock, blues, jazz, with vocals, without the vocals, however which way it goes, and that's something that definitely drew me to the music and to the culture and stuff like that as well myself. So it's great to hear somebody like yourself speak of it, because there's a lot of people in the business that work in the business, but they may not necessarily have that same feeling for music. So it's good to hear that you like a musical connoisseur in your own right. So, sort of going from that, was this a point when you heard like that sort of stuff? Did you know you wanted to work within the music business then, or was this something that, you heard it and you thought, I want to be a part of this, this was going on, or was you already making strides in that sort of direction?
Well, I was always making music, so I will tell you, when I first heard people ask me this question, when did you really fall in love with hip hop? And I would say, when I heard "Suckin' MCs" by Run DMC, I was in New York City for a summer. My grandmother lived there, and I stayed there for the whole summer. And I heard "Suckin' MCs" probably every 5 minutes on every radio station, on every box. That I could, anything that had music, I was listening to Suck MCs, and when I heard Run talk through that record and the way that beat was going, and he was talking about Larry Lair, and I was like, man, I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to I didn't care if I was dancing or rapping. I just wanted to be a part of it, and I totally fell in love with it. So by the time I was older, like my high school years in Germany, I was always rapping and making beats and writing songs. And I had a buddy of mine early on in my time, with the earlier years in high school, named Randy Fusco, who was probably the best beatboxer I've ever heard. So we would do radio commercials, and we would perform, and it didn't matter if we were on the bus to a football game or a basketball game, or we were just hanging out. We were always making music, and he was beatboxing and I was rapping, and we were doing these commercials. So it was always cool. And then as I moved to different places in Germany, when I finished my high school career at Würzburg, I hooked up with a friend of mine named Soul Elements, who's still in Germany and performing, and he's got a really, really good name and doing some things. And I used to continue to make beats and rap and make music. So I was determined to be in the music business, the entertainment business, but mainly I wanted to be in hip hop. And ultimately I wanted to be a rapper and a producer. Okay. And it wasn't until later on in my career, when I was trying to really focus on being a rapper, being in front of the mic or in front of this on stage, is when I realized, from a compensation standpoint, the business executive and the producer has an opportunity to make more income than the rappers. So when I was, on the radio up in Spokane, Washington, at KGU with my man Grand Mixer GMS, I was always wanting to be rapping, and he was making music and I was making music, and I was rapping, and we had a group and we were doing all these things. It happened to be when I started to talk to these record executives, and I realized that the rappers were only getting 6 to 8 to 12% on the record. And I said, well, man, why do I want to be the rapper? I want to be the guy who runs the record label or owns the record label, who makes the bigger percentage. So that's when I went from the transition of wanting to be an artist into being a producer and being a business executive.
And a businessman in your own right. Yeah, definitely. And, that's actually interesting, because I didn't know. I mean, like I said, I can tell you were creative and stuff, but so it doesn't surprise me that you've had the experiences with being a rapper and stuff as well. And we've had a few little stuff that you've done on rap records, but we'll get into that a bit later. I want to sort of segue from that, because into you going back, was this in California? It says you had a job at a publishing company, working as a distributor. So,
yes.
You're back in the States now, and you find yourself working within the business. What was that like, working for that company? And you sort of just alluded to some things that, you was learning a few different aspects of how people are getting paid and stuff like that. But how long was you with that company for, and what was that like?
So, working at a publishing company is really, I was living in Washington, and then connecting with, Master P, and hearing from so many people, the Bay Area is where you needed to be if you wanted to kind of progress your career. Most people were going to New York to be interns, or going to LA to be interns for record companies. And my path, I used to always ask myself the question, well, why do I have to go be an intern and go get people's coffee? And what am I going to learn from that experience? And I was lucky enough to meet someone like E40's Uncle St. Charles, who really gave me insight to the business from a distribution standpoint. Because most of the major labels, most of the rappers at that time, especially, when you look at the early 90s, everyone was trying to get a record deal. Hey, I want to rap for this. I want to get on BMG or Loud. I want to get on Sony or Mercury or one of these record companies. And they weren't thinking long term, how can I make sure that I maximize my income? So I was always like, well, why do I have to start at the bottom from that internship standpoint, when I feel that I understand music and how music's made? I understood telling a story, and I wanted to just start making records immediately. Now I had a small production company that I started into a label, and I was recording different things from punk rock to doing some sort of rap singles and stuff. But so I always had that mindset of being an entrepreneur and putting records out. But I never really knew the entire aspect of how distribution worked. How do I get into these retail stores where you're not knocking on each door and saying, hey, will you take 5 of my cassettes or a couple of my pieces of vinyl or a couple of my CDs? And then if it sells, you give me a check, and then I give you more units. Like, how do we do that? Absolutely. And because you understand the return game, and those folks that are musicians now who may not understand how it used to work, that was putting things on consignment and hoping it sells. Well, how do you in bulk push enough units that make sense? Yeah. Well, folks like St. Charles taught me how that works, how to put together a project and then make sure that you do what it takes to get your money, go get the money. So when Master P said in the No Limit Chronicles, he said Saint knew how to get the money. Well, he did. He knew how to put together projects, multiple projects, and make sure that distributors were high on what you were doing and making sure that they were excited about what you do.
Yeah, no, that's actually dope, because there's so many, not necessarily, unsung heroes within the industry, within the culture. And I think sometimes, St. Charles, his name sometimes is, I don't want to say left out. Those that know are familiar with his significance and stuff. E40's uncle, P definitely gives him a lot of props on things as well. So it's dope to know that you had your experiences and stuff around him, and you was under that sort of learning tree and still being able to take that and extend that with your own movements and stuff. So I guess you was meeting P quite a lot then, just around the time.
That is correct.
With just how
St. Charles is the one who kind of connected us, because at that time I was working at a radio station I alluded to before, KGU, and I was doing rap music. So I had the only rap show in the city of Spokane, Washington, which is in the eastern part of Washington. And myself and Grand Mixer GMS, we were doing the Rap Attack. So that was the name of our show. At that time, too, I was also DJing at a classic rock station, KVXO The Sound, as well as working. The station also owned the AM side, so I was doing business talk radio at the same time. So I'm working at that station and doing those two, AM and FM. I'm also doing the rap show on another station. And that's how I connected with St. Charles, because he would send me different artists and musicians, and I would play their records on air, and I would do some local promotion for them and stuff like that. So he's the one that kind of connected me with Master P, and it was just the whole like, hey, you really need to connect with this guy. So I met Master P because I was doing a show and I had somebody flake out on the show and I needed someone to perform, and my godbrother had turned me on to P and said, hey, you should you should use this guy, Master P. And, we did the show went well. And then after that, we built a relationship. So it was later on, after we were working together, St. Charles was the one saying to P, Tobin should be your manager, because I always had different ideas of how to do things, how to put songs together, how to tell a story. And I think that was beneficial, because Master P's drive is really high and really fast, and he always wanted to push. But I think, and he's said this before, that I kind of set a standard of how do we organize things, how do we make sure that the right pieces are in the right play when you're putting an album together and you're telling a story, and then also making things look bigger than they actually are. So when people step when people step and they want to be a part of a project, that they think like, hey, these guys are organized, they know what they're doing, and they're moving in the right direction. So all of those things kind of playing, it's kind of part of it's luck, part of it's skill, part of it's being in the right place at the right time. But a big piece of it I owe to St. Charles, because he really taught me a lot about putting records together, getting distribution, making sure you're getting paid properly, and making sure you're continuing this big funnel of music going through and moving forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's pretty dope. And even just to sort of touch on what you last said, I think that's important, because it takes more than, one element to make something happen. And, P having his drive and P having his qualities about him is very gun-ho. He's inspired a lot of people around the world, a lot of upcoming entrepreneurs, artists, producers, and not to just, some have gone on to be successful, some are still doing their thing. And the format that P kind of laid out, in one degree, if you just follow that, you'll be missing the other elements to the puzzle and stuff as well, because yes, he does have his drive and stuff like that as well, but as you said, sometimes you need somebody to bring in, whether it's the organization aspect, whether it's a bit of extension on the marketing and things of that nature and stuff like that. So we definitely know that you played a vital role. Can you define, just so that our audience is clear, what years, what was your span in the years that you was actually with No Limit? So what year did you start out with connecting with P and knowing, okay, this is an organization that I'm serious about working with, I'm comfortable with this guy, you saw enough in his quality of work and in his attributes that you feel you can go forward with the position of being the VP of marketing? Did you start out being the VP, or was it something,
No, I didn't. So, connecting in 92 and then eventually coming on board in 1993 is really when I came on to No Limit Records. It kind of started off as being, promo guy, coming up with certain ideas on marketing and those type of things. It was really St. Charles is the one who told P, like, hey, you need to make Tobin your manager and allow him to run the label. So that's kind of how that came to fruition. Is at that time I became P's, personal manager, business manager, general manager, and executive vice president of No Limit Records, also being in charge of the management company and managing all the artists. So it was kind of, we were, some folks would say it was a conflict of interest, but I was kind of doing everything. So when we were putting together albums, coming up with certain concepts or picking certain singles, anything from what are our giveaways going to look like? What are our promotions going to look like? Where are we going strategically? What cities are we going to go to, and what makes sense? Where do we need to send T-shirts at, and who are we going to talk to, and what the street team is going to look like, and meeting people and saying, okay, we're going to make a decision on who is going to help us promote, and building relationships and doing promotional events. Like, all of those things were things I was responsible for back at that time. So I was at No Limit from 93 to 96. And, if you think about the transition of going through, Mama's Bad Boy to The Ghetto's Trying to Kill Me, and the West Coast Bad Boys 99 Ways to Die True, and working with Mia X, and then bringing on Mia X and Servon and KLC and Moby Dick, and the starts and the Carlos Stevenson and the starting of the Beast by the Pound. I mean, all of those things I was influential in putting together and working through that process. And I think the concept of doing a movie, a direct-to-DVD movie, and what that looked like, and putting the strategy together behind that, I think that was the thing that I probably overall was my responsibility of making sure people knew who we were and what we were doing, and kind of making sure the world knew we were a national brand. And we weren't just a local group or local artist or local label. We were actually national.
Yeah, no, but that's actually, you definitely did that. And, cause, by 96, things were definitely bubbling or booming in one aspect, but they went on to higher periods and stuff after that. Over that time, did you encounter like Tupac at any points?
Well, we connected with Tupac prior to that because we went on the road with Tupac. So at that time, Tupac was performing. TRU, Master P, we were opening up for Tupac. So there were different shows that we were doing and going on the road with Tupac. So the time that by the time I reconnected with Tupac, it was probably right before it was actually right before he passed away, not too long. And we interacted a little bit. He was coming back to the Bay and performing, and he was also recording with artists like 40. He was recording with SIBO and folks like that. So he was continuously recording. So I would see him around in studios and things like that. The last time I actually saw Tupac alive was at Too Short's retirement party. So I believe it was a few months before he had passed away. So I saw him at Too Short's retirement party, and said hi, and there were a bunch of people there, and then after that, unfortunately, he died not too much longer after that.
Yeah, no, rest in peace to Pop, man. And he's definitely one of the greatest of all time, and did it real big for the culture. And we know that No Limit definitely had a heavy influence from Pac. We've heard P speak in the past that he actually tried to sign Pac. I don't know if it was actually a formal thing or more of an idea. Is that anything that you had any knowledge of or any part to play?
I mean, that was really more of an idea, because if you think about timelines of at that time, going on the road with Pac was bigger than Master P at that time. I think it was more of saying, hey, one day I'd like to sign him, but as far as being something that was going to happen, no. Because by the time we were on the upswing in 95 and 96, by 95, we were national. 96 is when I would say when we broke open the doors and people really knew who we were. By that time, Tupac was so deep in the death row, and figuring out what he was going to do and what he was going to be, and starting his own label and all that kind of stuff, that wasn't something that was going to come to fruition at that particular point, no.
Okay. And what about with Snoop Dogg signing, with Snoop Dogg coming over to No Limit? I know people have a lot of mixed views on it. You being out in the West Coast at the time, what do you think?
Well, I think Snoop was looking for a home, and P was looking for something to really take him in No Limit to the next level. So it just worked. I mean, he through Brian Turner, and Brian at that time, you got to understand Priority. They pretty much, when you talk about gangster rap, Priority pretty much owned gangster rap. So I think ultimately that whole transition had to do with Snoop needed someone to watch his back, and P wanted something. One thing about P, he loves to make sure that No Limit and his name is the biggest thing in the room. So he was going to make that happen, and that's through Brian Turner having the relationship with, or at least having knowledge and communication with Suge and Snoop and P, and putting that all together, and then P saying, "Hey, let's go make this thing happen." And pulling the trigger on that. And I think what happened, I don't know if Snoop's best music was made at No Limit, but I think that gave Snoop the opportunity to kind of stand on his own 2 feet, do his own thing. And I know he's very appreciative of P, and I know P is appreciative of Snoop during that transition. And I think on the West Coast, it was more of like, wait, what's going on? Or how, does that sound make sense? And it worked out. There were some hit records that were done, and Snoop sold a lot of records, and obviously it was a good thing for him, and obviously a good thing for No Limit. It was like signing the biggest free agent in an American sport, like if you're talking football or basketball, like that. It was a huge signing, and a lot of people were talking about that.
Yeah, no, okay. And staying on that, just sticking with the music and the creative side of things. So with your time at No Limit, you sort of referenced earlier about yourself just having experience with music, creating music and stuff as well. So you was around, King George, Big Ed, a lot of Mia X, a lot of creative, Servan. What were some of those studio sessions like? Are there any particular standout sessions that you feel as though, you know what, I was there when this was recorded and, can share some of those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about putting together the Down South Hustlers, and I was responsible for flying Pimp C and Bun B out to California and putting them up for several weeks as we were doing the Down South Hustlers. Yeah, rest in peace to Pimp C. And having those guys come to California and recording those guys, and then also working on most of the Ice Cream Man and Pimp C being a part and Bun B being a part of that whole Down South movement. At that time, they weren't as large as they would eventually become, but people respected them as artists, and they respected them as a group, and they said what they said, and they stood by what they stood by. So when those guys were recording players from the South, or when we were recording that record, or when we re-recorded I'm About It, West Coast, but with KLC's beat, and then putting together Mr. Ice Cream Man and all of those projects, the thing that was so exciting to me and kind of sticks out to me is the TRU True album, because we recorded that album in about 2 weeks. There was probably another week of mixing and all that stuff, but as far as the recording aspect of it, it was sitting down and saying, hey, we've got a certain amount of time to get this album out. We've already got pre-orders on this album because we were pre-promoting everything at that time. And watching folks like Mia X and C Murder and Big Ed and King George and all of these guys and Silk the Shocker record these songs at a rapid pace, and having a sense of love for it, because it was exciting, because we would be doing promotion and marketing during the day, and we would be at the studio all night. So we were probably, P and I at that time, we were probably up 20 hours a day recording these projects and doing the different things that we needed to do. And the great thing about being in the studio, and you're working with someone like a Ken Franklin, K. Lou, who did some production, but also helped us with the recording of these projects. There was an excitement around. We knew we had something really special. I think the other thing to it too is it's the work ethic of Master P, because he would, at the end of the night when I would drop him off at home, probably 2 a.m, 3 a.m, he would say, hey, what time are you coming to pick me up? And I would say, all right, I'll be here at 6. And he would like, okay, I'll be ready. And then I'd come in at 6, he'd be ready, and we'd go and start our day all over again. And this is consistent days of making sure that we had enough good quality music, and making sure we're having a strategy around what that music was, and how we were telling a story, starting with the Ghettos Trying to Kill Me, going on to 99 Ways, the West Coast Bad Boys, the Down South Hustlers, the Ice Cream Man. All of those projects were important to tell a story. And bringing in someone like Mia X was very helpful, because she had her own idea and her own sound, and she was a star down in Louisiana, specifically New Orleans. And KLC was an up-and-coming producer who had great sound, and Moby Dick was really good at playing keys and R&B. It just all came together at the same time, and it just kind of took off like a rocket, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's dope. Speaking of stories, what's the story on Reverend DuRong?
Yeah, so we, the whole concept of Reverend DuRong was just kind of, those folks who go to church, and there's always this fast talking preacher, not always, but a lot of times it's a fast talking preacher who has, ideas around money, and sometimes they're so fast talking you don't know if they're seedy or not, and coming up with the concept of I don't know. I've been to several churches, and you kind of see a guy who's driving around in the Cadillac or the Mercedes Benz, and they've got the gold and the platinum and all that, and you're like, okay. And you think about that, what that minister looks like or that reverend looks like. The whole concept of Reverend DuRong was just like, he's a guy in the hood who makes a ton of money, and he's a preacher, and the whole concept of that is what went on music, went on albums, right? So once the whole dynamic of with King George and his voice and the way he would enunciate certain words and his comedic timing worked really well on those albums. So whether it was a No Limit album, or as we, as P, King and I split, and we had Me and Mine Entertainment, my label, we would do those skits. They just kind of carried over because people liked them. They liked them because they were funny. They could have a concept of somebody, who's a fast talking minister, and the comedic timing of King, it just made it really funny. And then we put kids on there and different people with different kind of concepts. So overall, Reverend DuRong was just a very popular, character, and people really loved the character itself.
Yeah, no, I think it was definitely dope, and I think it was creative how you was able to, just use skits at the time across different albums and have a sort of, a character within it that continues over. We could tell it was King and stuff. Was that a character you created? Because I've seen it still sort of surfacing around. Was there some type of spin-off show or something to it?
Yeah, so we did a movie. I think it was kind of a combination of a lot of things on the creation of it. I think we talked about Reverend Wright and all that. So the concept of it, I think it was just the combination of all of us. I think the name we talked about, Reverend DuRong, I mentioned Reverend Wrong or Reverend Right and Do Right, and we just kind of came up with these different names. And I think it was just really ultimately, probably, I think it was probably more King kind of said, hey, DuRong, that's kind of something that's kind of catchy, and kind of based on that, that's when Pete was like, yeah, DuRong, that's it. And then kind of developing the character from there. And I think what you kind of see now is taking that kind of basic concept of a crooked reverend and putting him to screen as the transition and the development that I did with some assistance from a director, David Markrisha, to kind of bring it to the movie side of it, and then a comedian like Lester Bibbs kind of making that into a really a viable character that's not just a 1 minute skit, that's a full feature movie or a TV or TV show. It just kind of presents that to the world.
Yeah, no, I understand, and it shows the creative aspects of just that you've got the ability to add dimensionality onto something. So with that being said, we talk Reverend DuRong and King George, because I mention it is because something that, sometimes when people split and they go separate ways, some things aren't carried over, but King George is still sort of carried over TRU and stuff like that, and the Reverend DuRong stuff. In terms of the split, we've heard some of the stuff on the No Limit Chronicles. We've heard you speak on it in past interviews and stuff, but if you could probably speak slightly on what point was it that you decided to split. But prior to that, actually, I wanted to ask you about the situation with Birdman and No Limit and how you personally felt at the time, because, instead of us going back, we'll stay there and then we'll get to splitting from No Limit after that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at the time, we, if you look at Cash Money at that time from a local standpoint, if you're talking about Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, moving into parts of Texas, they were well known. Robert Gillerman, who used to run Southwest Wholesale, which was a big distributor, one stop at the time really, but then eventually became a distributor, they had a relationship with those guys, and they were, really hot. What my whole idea about working with Cash Money had to do with, I loved their music and what they were doing, but it was more of, if we had a label like Cash Money with No Limit Records, I often thought that we would control the South and nobody else could handle us, and we could move into expanding our sound to the East Coast. And we already had that sound from the West because we had West producers and we spent time in the West. We were already moving towards the South as developing the Down South Hustlers. and signing with Baby and Slim and putting their records out, and even if we just did a little bit of working production angle and doing the distribution, that could have been something that would have been huge. I mean, you talk about groundbreaking, right? With their sound, what they did, they were already really popular. And I think the biggest thing for me was I wanted to work with them because I respect their talent first and foremost. But I thought that it was a good opportunity for us to really, really run hip hop or change hip hop, and almost like being overnight becoming a major label. When you have a label like Cash Money, and you work with them, and at the time we being at No Limit. And then all we would need to do is figure out how do we get an East Coast sound, or how do we get somebody from the East Coast. We become known nationally really overnight. And that's really was the focus at that time, or what we were trying to do.
Okay. And you was there with P when you met with Baby and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
I was there. I was the one who kind of pushed the meeting. I was the one who wanted to do the deal. And then, yes, there was a portrayal of myself and P meeting with Baby and Slim at the restaurant. All of that is definitely very accurate.
Okay. So in terms of that then, because you just expressed your thoughts on it, and people have different mixed thoughts. Some say he a boss in his own right, Birdman, Baby, he a boss in his own right, and it's good that they both sort of went separate ways. I agree it would have been huge for the culture. And me as a young fan at the time, when I came across Cash Money, initially, I thought they had something to do with No Limit just based on the presentation. And it would have been great to see, especially if that could have happened. But, people have differences on opinion. So with differences in opinion being taken into account, we get to you sort of departing with No Limit. There were creative differences there. There's been somewhat differences in stories, and we're hearing that some say you was trying to take some artists and leave. Obviously there's always multiple sides to a story, and the artist is cutting down.
Well, they say there's three sides, each side in the truth. Yeah. I will just say I was never trying to take any artist and leave. I ultimately the story's been told, but since you're asking, I never tried to take any artist and leave. I had pretty much every dollar that I owned, including my credit, invested in No Limit Records. So I was not trying to depart from No Limit Records. I was not trying to do a side deal for No Limit Records. What I did have was a relationship with certain labels that were interested in publishing deals, and there were producers that were coming to me that wanted publishing deals. So that was the whole dynamic of it. And you would have to talk to P why this thing got blown out of proportion, and he decided he wanted, in his conversation with me, is he wanted his company back. So that's something you'd have to talk to him about. I haven't talked to him in 20 some odd years. I couldn't even tell you the date the last time that we saw each other. But I will just say, at no time was I trying to, move on or anything, because everything that I had was invested in No Limit Records. If I had $1, I was trying to put it into the company because I saw the vision of what it was going to be. I probably would say that I even believed in it more than anybody else that he had around him, because I was all in on what we were doing, how we were doing, and then the different concepts of bringing music out to the world, and then developing into doing movies and heck, I even had ideas to put together video games and all these different things before it was popular for video games, because we're talking about we're in the early to mid 90s. So those ideas around that, and and think about this, even prior to that, Master P was looking at signing an artist deal. And I'm the one who said, we're not doing that. No, we're going to hold off. This is the whole distribution deal, and making sure that we held out for that was me. So when I think about, King George and C Murder being upset with me because we turned down a significant amount of dollars from Big Beat Atlantic, because they wanted to advance all this money, but then they wanted to own the rights to the name and the likeness of Master P. And I was like, why would we do that? We're so close. And then signing the deal with Priority Records and being a part of that process, There was no way I was going to, you know, gonna split up because we were on this trajectory that was amazing. So so when folks say that, it's just not accurate. And you know, I've talked about it so many times, Fonzie. It's hilarious, but there's no way that was going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. And you'd have to talk to P of why he thought the way he thought without even having a conversation with me, or why he made the decisions that he wanted his company back as if I was taking over or took over the company.
Yeah, no, it's a shame, and even from some of the stuff we spoke about, and that we can tell from you work and from the type of person and character that you are. You invested countless hours, you invested a lot of time, energy, resources, stuff. So that wasn't for nothing. That was definitely because you believed in it and you was a part of what was happening. It seems like when we look back at the story of No Limit, there's a lot of splits and rifts that happen down to miscommunication and different things and stuff like that. So and sometimes just dealing with our people in general, it's something that often afflicts us, just miscommunication causing to things sort of falling out and breaking down. But moving, I guess, on from that in a positive light, you know, as we said, I know you probably not sick of telling the story, but it's a part of your story and a part of your life. But we ain't trying to dwell on the negative aspects. You move forward and continued on with working in the business, still releasing some compilation. At what point do you make it back to Texas and you know, start working with Lil Troy?
Well, you know, when P and I split and King split and King George and I kind of came together to do the Life of a Kingpin album, there at that time nobody really wanted a King George album. You know, it just felt like they weren't ready for it. So I was having a difficulty with getting distribution. And really, at the end of the day, of all the distributors I talked to, and including St. Charles, because St. Charles and I had a conversation about this probably a month or two ago, and I was frustrated because no one really wanted to do a deal with me for my label at that particular point. And at that moment, King George was my only artist, and you know, Saint said like, hey, there wasn't a lot of buzz for the King George project as a solo away from No Limit. So the only distributor, one stop, was Southwest Wholesale in Houston. So after I, you know, built a relationship, at the time was Mark Gammon was their guy who was bringing on new labels, and then eventually Robert Gillerman was in charge of the whole operations. He's part owner of the company, and I built a relationship with him. They were the only distribution company that really wanted to do business with me and do business with the King George project. There was another, you know, small distributor in Kansas City who really helped us get started by doing some COD business with us, and then we kind of took that money to market and promote. But once, you know, Southwest Wholesale in Houston was the only distribution company that wanted to work with us, that's when I started spending a lot of time in Texas. So if there was a time, if you looked at, once we had the success of the King George album, it was on the Billboard chart several weeks, then we did our own compilation, the Players and Hustlers album, and then we did True Vision, and then we started doing all these different projects. People knew us in Texas because that's where we sold a lot of records. Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Kansas City, Iowa. Like when that whole Midwest and South, we were really big. Okay. And we'd go to clubs, and people would just, you know, it was almost so crazy that we were really famous in certain parts of the South. So I think a big piece of that was we just spent a lot of time there because that's where people liked us and we were hot. I connected with Troy because, one, I sold a lot of records in down there and with Southwest Wholesale, and he had a relationship with Southwest Wholesale where he was putting his projects out. But he was looking for some marketing and promotion. And Mean Green, the famous DJ, radio DJ Mean Green, who had his Mean Green album that went gold through No Limit, he's the one who connected me with Troy and introduced me to Troy, along with Robert Gillerman. So it was a combination of Mean Green and Robert Gillerman connecting us. And he wanted some marketing done of a Mass 187 project. So when he had that project, I helped with some promotion and stuff, and it didn't do very well. It, you know, sold some records, but nothing big. And at that time, Troy was trying to figure out whether he wanted to put out another album. And we talked about, or I kind of gave him the suggestion, why don't you put your own album out? And we utilize your name and we utilize your concepts and ideas. We put this album together and then we make it happen. And, you know, prior to, you know, us working together on this Sitting Fat Down South album, Troy had some moderate success with a few thousand copies, but what happened with the Sitting Fat Down South record, you know, we had that record all over the South. We went to the Kappa Beach party. We were out in Galveston and we were promoting the single "Wanna Be a Baller," and the thing just took off. And my relationship with Stan Cobble, aka SK, was really the street and promotion aspect of blowing that record up. And with me and my distribution and really the whole St. Charles thing is what kind of made sure the album was in the retail stores. We had a lot of units out there, and we wound up, you know, selling, you know, over 300,000 albums before the album transitioned on to Universal.
Okay, yeah, that was dope. I definitely remember that. That "Wanna Be a Baller," man. Even out here in the UK, they was playing that. It reached out here, so you know.
Well, I know it did because I've been out there, and you know, I'll be in a club, you know, and I hear the record playing, so it's always exciting to hear about that, and when people talk about it, it's exciting to be a part of. You know, when you think about, you know, my experience with No Limit, and then, you know, having some significant success with King George as well, and then transitioning on to, you know, someone like Troy, being a part of, I would say, a three-prong approach of seeing some meteoric rise in success, it's exciting to be a part of that. And things move so fast, and there's just an excitement around it, and sometimes a little bit of anxiousness too. So when you're a part of multiple projects like that, you know, you start to think, wow, like, man, this we're going to do it again. You know, it's kind of like, oh, you win the Super Bowl, right? Or you win the playoffs, or you win a championship, and then you move on to another team, and then you win the championship again, and then you move on to another team, win the championship again. You feel that you're part of something magical and special, and it worked out really well.
No, definitely, and you have been. And even just on that note, how do you, I guess, because you still hold a lot of hats and a lot of different creative endeavors, how do you balance or resolve a lot of that? Because, you know, sometimes people find it, you know, convoluted when you're managing a lot of different projects and stuff like that. What was your sort of focus and discipline that kept you grounded or keeps you grounded?
Well, I think the ultimate thing is just what's the overall goal, right? It's, you know, I always try to be in a situation, am I part of a solution? Can I solve a problem? That's the only deal that I think about. Can I solve the problem? If I can solve a problem and I can help people, you know, get to where they want to go, that's how it works, and that's how it's worked for me. So when I was at No Limit, how do I solve a problem of making us into a national brand? Someone who has all this energy like Master P. Like, how do I make sure that I solve the problem where people see him in the best possible light and people as a person that people want to do business with? The same thing with King George, same thing with Troy, and same thing, you know, with my own career as I do things. It's all about how do I solve the problem? How do I create this great attitude, effort, loyalty within myself and within the people who are around me? And once you do all of those things, you start prioritizing what makes most sense. What's going to get you the most bang for your buck? The whole piece about moving down south and doing the down south hustlers had to do with, it was pure economics if you think about it. P was from the South. He was from New Orleans. Going back to Louisiana made sense from that perspective. But it was a dollar would go a lot further in the South than it would be on the West Coast. You know, I could spend $1,000 in the South somewhere in Mississippi or Alabama and have all the commercials and really, really move units. If I spend $1,000 in LA or San Francisco or Oakland, it doesn't really do much for us. So it's the economic side of it. It's keeping organized. It's making sure where should I put my money or my time and effort, and making sure that, you know, we're solving problems along the way. And if we do those things, that's how you can manage everything at the same time. And also getting some people to help you out when you know that it's overwhelming. Who can I get to assist me or help me with the entire process of whatever I'm doing?
Yeah, no, that's real, having that support system. And I want to say having a great attitude as well. And that's one thing we noticed from you online. You always imparting a lot of positivity, always, a lot of big smiles, a lot of, fun activity and stuff, being out there with different people in the world, just showing, a good aspect of life. You don't put out anything negative or anything like that. And it's definitely stuff that people appreciate and see from you, So I want to say I do personally. So, with that being said, working around No Limit, King George, Lil Troy, in the music business for many years, seeing a lot of success and understanding the fundamentals of how things were done with distribution. When things started changing towards the digital era, did you sort of see it coming as something that was going to kill or change the business? Did it something that made you think I need to transition from this now into other endeavors? Because as we know, that entrepreneurial spirit can never die. You're still out here doing a lot of different stuff in that now, and but did you feel like with the digital shift coming in, like this was like a big change in the game?
I did. One of the things that I used to talk to different record companies about is just diversifying what you're doing and figure out how you monetize the digital aspect of it. I had a conversation with Jay Boberg from MCA. He was the CEO of MCA. And I remember having a conversation as Napster was taking off. Like, you got to find a way to monetize this digital download thing, because if you don't, the industry's going to be in trouble. Well, I think the big piece, what I knew it was going to be a challenge after I'm having that conversation and people are shunning me, thinking that, I don't know what I'm talking about, because they think that, this thing has lasted for the last 60, 70, 80 years. It's going to continue to last. I think, when distributors couldn't pay me, so when you have distributors that owe you, almost $500,000 and they can't pay you, or you have another distributor that owes you over $250,000, they can't pay you. Well, those are the things that make you realize you need to figure out something else to do, because you're not getting paid for what you're doing, what you've already sold. And I think that was the writing on the wall. Unfortunately, I wasn't in a position to figure out, I didn't know enough engineers at the time. Like now, I know engineers and folks like that could probably, do find all kinds of ways to monetize, digital music and film and video games and all that stuff. But at that time, I didn't know any. And I wish I knew some folks that could have done that, because, we could have changed a lot of the industry, and the industry would have had, it would have been a lot different. And nowadays, like, folks, they download things for free. It's very rare that they pay. And the only way, or not the only way, but the two things that an artist can do to make money is, one is have merchandise, because that's very important, because people will always want merchandise. The second thing is making sure that they're able to perform. Because of COVID-19, they can't. So if you think about all these festivals, money is exchanging hands for these artists. That's why record companies are doing 360 deals, where they make money off of everything that you do and everything these artists do. And unfortunately, artists aren't really thinking about how they hold the power. They're allowing the record companies to give them maybe $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 up front. They're signing these 360 deals, and they think that they've got a good deal when they don't. And I will just tell you, it's the same thing like I told Master P back in the 90s. You hold out and you build your brand, then you can write your own ticket. So that's something that folks need to think about. And when I think about the digital aspect of business, understand how you can monetize yourself. And if you understand how you can monetize yourself, you can be successful. And I think so many of artists are not, they're not doing that for themselves. They want, here, I signed, you make me a star, instead of doing what it takes to make yourself a star. And it's just at this end, there's sensory overload, because there's so many artists. I get a lot of music people send to me all the time. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But it's right place, right time, but it's making sure you're willing to do the work. The only bad thing I think now is with COVID, you can't perform in front of people like you did before.
Yeah.
So if you can't perform, That's a whole revenue stream you don't have. So I've been talking to artists, if you can get to an engineer that can put together, nowadays we've got a lot of things digitally, we've got a lot of VR systems. How do we perform? How do we put on a concert and people can use their VR systems, right? We do a virtual tour where people can feel that they're at the concert. They've got these VR glasses, they've got the headphones on, and they feel that they're in the concert. And you do that in a musical setting, that's how you're going to change the game. And if you're a small artist and you know a few engineers that can help you develop that or design that for a specific platform, and you can sell that service to other folks, or you can, from a standpoint, building your fan base by putting together a fan program that people can use point system to buy things that not only you offer, maybe there's Amazon products you can offer, maybe there's video games, other things that you can design. If you do those things, you can be successful. But so many young folks or artists, they're looking for that instant gratification, and you got to put in the work.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's I want to say the right. That's invaluable advice right there for anybody. And as you said, we do live in a time of fast gratification that people want things instantly. To some degree, it may have always been that way, or people are in the conditionality of that's the way to sort of go about it. Some say there's an esteem with some people to, feel as though I'm an artist and I've been signed and I've been, sort of given this, and they feel as though it uplifts them. That's why I have the utmost respect for what you guys have done and achieved and still continue to do because of the work that it takes, prior to making anything happen. Like you said, those 20 hours a days, nonstop grinding, those, extra details, crossing the T's and dotting the I's and stuff like that. It takes a lot. And even just what you just imparted there for artists, it's definitely true. If more people was able to tap into their own inner power and just hold that, because that's what they use to create their art at the same time. So it's just people are keeping that sort of entrepreneurial mind there. Understandably, it's not for everybody. Everybody's different. That's why other people are needed to play their part. Some people, they can't really play that part. So, I understand that. But
think about it this way, Fonzie. You want to watch your money. I mean, even if you're not an entrepreneur by heart, you want to make sure you're watching your money and understanding where your money goes. And you want to make sure you're doing the basics, like, making sure your taxes are paid and making sure if record companies are spending money, where is the money going? What are they spending it on? Is it going to benefit you? Yep. Are you just a throwaway artist that they need to lose money because it's better for their taxes? Or are you an artist they're going to invest their time and effort and money into? You, at the very least, if you sign a deal with somebody, you should at least know what they're doing. Or if they're not doing the work you want them to do, maybe you can say, hey, look, why don't you give me this material and I'll go ahead and take care of this. I'll go ahead and promote myself. And it's not about being an entrepreneur. It's about monitoring your dollars and making sure you're not getting messed over in the game. The music industry is known for messing people over because they've been allowed to do it for years and years. Yeah. Now, if you're a hot artist, you think about artists like Lil Nas X, who basically he grabbed a beat that he leased for next to nothing and created a song that was huge, and then the next thing you know it, he hooked up with Billy Ray Cyrus and went viral, and the rest is history. Yep. So you have to do the work, and folks that aren't, just because you're not an entrepreneur, I will tell you, like I tell a lot of my students, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you want to be successful, you have to be okay with being uncomfortable and figuring out how you can put yourself in the best position to be successful. Read up on other folks who are entrepreneurs and what works for them. Take that information and knowledge and use that for your own career. It's not enough to say, hey, I got a record deal and I'm going to let someone else do it, because at the end of the day, they're not going to invest in you more than you're going to invest in yourself. Even if you have a deal that's not a good deal, okay, let's work that angle, make the most money you can make, and then present yourself in a better position.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And with that being said, you mentioned this is stuff that you actually give to your students and stuff. So we know that you teach classes. We know that you've got other business endeavors like Psycho Cider. Can you talk a bit more about the your new projects and stuff that you've been doing and what you're working on at the minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So Psycho Cider is my business that I have. It's a cider business. So we make a variety of ciders or alcoholic beverages, little less than 7% alcohol with different flavors that we are primarily distributing in Northern California. So ultimately, years ago, I wanted to do sake because sake is really popular.
I like sake.
Yeah. So I wanted to do that in a flavor. And my mind was like, well, I want to do a flavor sake. Well, in the United States, it's really difficult to get a sake license because you have to have a brewer's license and a wine license, and it's really difficult to get. And as I was progressing and transitioning, I had someone tell me, hey, why don't you try hard cider? I was never really into hard cider. I did drink it once in a while, but never really. And I had some, and most of the cider that I had was very sweet. And I wanted to provide a cider that wasn't sweet, that was smooth, wasn't too bitter, wasn't too sweet, but had a really good alcohol content. So I came up with the concept of going from Psycho Sake to Psycho Cider, and then coming up with different flavors no one else has. And that was part of the transition. Like when people drink it, some folks are like, oh, I don't really like sweet. Well, why don't you try it? And when they try it, it's low sugar because we're using the fruit to it. We're not using any additives or sugars that's not directly from the fruit. So fruit enhances the sugar. It's a smooth taste. And it was about, hey, how do I get into restaurants? It was the same concept of distribution. How do I get into bars and restaurants? What does that look like? Building relationships, offering discounts, paying for advertising in retail stores as we transition into cans. Like the same concept that I did when I was at No Limit and Me and Mine Entertainment is the same concept that I'm using for Psycho Cider, is getting into in front of as many people as possible, throwing good events, and making sure that people feel good about the product and they enjoy the product. And then the marketing concept of the people that are in the ads that I put together, and that we work with different folks that are excited about it. And once we've done that, we've kind of created this excitement. We did lose a little bit of momentum with COVID. I wouldn't say a lot of momentum with COVID, but transitioning from the kegs we were doing on premise to moving into cans has kind of made us relevant again. You talked about adjusting with digital. Well, we had to adjust with COVID by going into cans. People are going to buy alcohol some way, somehow. Why not they get it from us and we provide that to them into a retail environment, whether it's a grocery outlet, or whether it's a liquor store like a Perry's Liquor, or whether it's a restaurant. They are able to get, buy 4-packs, 6-packs of Psycho Cider and enjoy those things. So that whole dynamic has been exciting to me. And I've been telling everyone, I'm like, this is what I felt like when I first went to No Limit, or I first started Me and Mine Entertainment. I had all this excitement and energy around putting this project together, and it's starting to just really start to grow, and people are starting to know about it. I think the other thing that's exciting about it, with the internet, right? With Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all of these things, more people are reaching out all over California, and even all over the world, are saying, man, I'm interested in this. And even if people can't purchase the product now because it's really only based out of California, Northern California, more and more people are buying the shirts and the hats and the doggy jackets and all those things that we have that are available for folks. People are purchasing that. And I'm getting people who are pop-up pictures all over the country. Says, man, when are you going to get it out here? So that's creating that buzz prior to us even having our license in other states and being able to move to those other states. And eventually we will get there. So that's one aspect of what we're doing with Psycho Cider. The other project that I have, I'm doing with one of my former students who's now my business partner. His name is Josh Hammer. We started Costen and Hammer Network, which is a network that we're doing with YouTube to promote different shows. Some of it's educational, some of it's comedy, some of it's about sports. And we're raising money for the Special Olympics here in California. So we're focused on the Special Olympics. Before we did the Make-A-Wish Foundation and we were able to grant a wish, now we're focused on the on Special Olympics, because it's, you know, it's important to Josh and myself, Hammer and I, that we give back to the community. And those are really the two projects that I'm really focused on right now, because that's a lot. And then also I teach at Holy Names University. I teach a variety of business courses: sports management, sports marketing, sports psychology. So I'm just really, you know, focused on teaching others how to maximize their income, and teaching folks how to start businesses, and teaching folks how to run the business departments, because I think that's very important, because so many people didn't have the opportunity to have conversations with folks that keep it real. And that's the challenge I had when I was in college. When I was in college, you know, there weren't too many folks that kept it real with me. They gave me this textbook version of what life was going to be, or what work was going to be. I try to be 100% real with any student that I have. I tell them, hey, this is what you need to learn, and this is what you'll probably be working on in your career. And I always tell folks, start a business if you can. It's good for your tax situation. It's good for you to kind of be able to write some things off for those folks who are, you know, in the U.S. with our tax laws and the way they are. We're able to write some things off. So if you're able to start a business, you're able to buy property. Those are the type of things that I try to, you know, teach folks how to do and help them with. It's important. And then eventually we're going to start talking about cryptocurrency. I'm still learning more and more about it. I have friends who are in cryptocurrency, but that is, if you can get ahead of the game with cryptocurrency, that's going to do something that benefits you.
Yeah, I was going to say, just on that note, great advice and stuff once again, but I was going to ask you if you had any interest around crypto, and I could maybe see you in the CBD business, which is booming and going to be, you know, quite huge at the minute, but still exploding as well. So that could be another area of interest for you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always opportunity. Like I said earlier, can you solve a problem? If you figure out how to solve a problem, all those things come into play. And there's no guarantee. I mean, heck, I've failed on businesses. I've won on businesses. It just depends. It's just how it goes. Like I have a passion for service that defines my personality. I always want to try to help as many people as possible. Sometimes that works to a benefit, sometimes it's a detriment, because, you know, people can take advantage of that. But I keep grinding because I know what I'm doing can work. If right relationships, people in the right roles, and me continuing to learn and grow, that's how it works for anybody. So I'm excited about the Costen and Hammer Network, CHN, because we're going to be giving back to our community through the Special Olympics. And I'm excited about Psycho Cider because I'm building something special and different, and something that no one else is doing at this particular time. And I'll continue to do that and grow that as long as I can.
Yeah, well, with the Psycho Cider, we're definitely excited about it here in the UK. I've been seeing a lot of the posts, you drinking the lemonade slushes and all this stuff, and I'll be like, you know, that stuff look good. You know, when you got something worked out that we could order maybe some cases and stuff out here, we're going to do that. And
absolutely,
so, I want to say salute and support for the work that you've done, you know, and continue to be doing, and especially importantly, the charitable work that you're doing as well, and teaching others and imparting knowledge onto others and stuff. I think that's commendable. Is there anything that you want to plug lastly, or any messages you want to leave?
Well, you know, no, I mean, there's a couple of artists that I, you know, kind of watch for and look for. EDM producer named Ben Trax. He's out of Seattle, Washington. He's real hot right now. So if you're looking for a hot EDM producer, Ben Trax is hot. My man Kazi, rapper from the South, from Pensacola, Florida. He's somebody I check out as well. So Ben Trax and Kazi, both of those guys are hot. So I'm always looking for stuff from them. And that's pretty much about it. If you can give back to your community, no matter where you live in the world, that's important. The other aspect of, if there's an opportunity for you to vote, no matter what country you're in, use that opportunity to vote and use that opportunity to make change. You do those things, I think everything else will take care of itself.
You know, it's been great having you on the platform. About the online, heavily been inspired from No Limit, and if there wasn't, you know, your work within No Limit, maybe No Limit wouldn't have been the No Limit what it was too at the same time. So, you know, we owe a lot of our success and our development to yourself and stuff too. You know, because you were a huge part. So, just want to put that out there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you so much, and be safe over there in the UK, man. Thank you.
All right, much love, man. So, family, we're gonna cut this one right now. Peace to everybody. Stay safe, stay woke, and always look out for you folks. Peace.
You're watching About That TV, your one-stop shop for the hottest urban edutainment from the UK to the US. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and also join the membership for exclusive content. Yeah, so once again, be sure to tap in with The Real. Drop your comments, let us know your thoughts, and do check us out on our official website, aboutthatonline.com. Peace.